Continue reactions of Texas beating up on Michigan in the Big House, this time with Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis and Lacey Butler, your hosts. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5 Hour Energy, the number 5hourenergy.com, and use promo code Locked On CFB to receive 20% off your order. Today's episode also brought to you by Pro Football Focus. PFF has got you covered all season long with the best data, tools, and analysis in the game. Sign up for PFF Plus today to unlock all of their famous player grades and premium stats. Push to the playoffs in your fantasy league with in-season tools and award-winning rankings from fantasy expert Nathan Janke, and stay connected to the next generation of talent with the best NFL draft coverage on the planet. No matter what you're looking for, PFF Plus has what you need to make winning decisions all season long. So sign up for PFF Plus today for less than $10 per month. So bringing Max back on the show today. Once again, just final thoughts on Texas, Michigan. Max, one of the best in the business, getting his thoughts on all angles from what he saw in the Big House. And, oh, yeah, he was there in person. So we're going to talk about that. And then in the last segment, SEC power rankings for week 3. Chris Gordy from Locked On SEC has dropped his power rankings. And who better to discuss those power rankings than somebody who knows a little bit about everything, about every team in the SEC, Max Chadwick. So, like I said, you were at the game, travel from Cincinnati to Ann Arbor to watch it. And I just want to ask, what was your travel schedule? When did you leave and when did you get back, right? Because I know you got to be tired and you're right back to just, discussing almost every college football game there is.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. So Dawn and I, we decided instead of trying to drive up that morning, which would have been awful. So we tried to drive. We drove up Friday during the afternoon, about a 4-hour drive. Stayed in maybe the worst motel of all time. I booked the cheapest one I could find, and there was a reason it was the cheapest one. It was awful, but we got a cheap motel. We're able to go to the Ann Arbor, go to the bars that night, watch the NFL game, just enjoy Ann Arbor. Great college town, honestly. It's the first time I've ever been there, and it was awesome. Really lived up to all the hype I heard about it. And then, woke up early Saturday morning, went to the game, and then right after the game was over, literally actually started the fourth quarter, we kind of left because the game was over by then. We drove back home and got home around 7 or 8 p.m. at night, so we were able to catch the night games too. So, crazy last couple of days of travel, but it was an awesome weekend, and I'm happy. I'm glad to cross off the Big House on my bucket list right now. So.
Yeah, for sure. And before we, talk about the Big House itself, you said you were there on Friday night. What kind of was the vibe on Friday night? Were there a lot of Texas fans? Did you feel like, okay, Texas really showed up and showed out? Or, were Michigan fans? Like what was the vibe on Friday night before the game?
It was a lot more Texas fans than I would have expected. Now, I know the fan basis for Texas is outstanding, but that's a really far trip for them, right? Going basically all the way up from the country, going all the way to the bottom of the country, all the way to the top of the country, essentially. So they traveled really well. Dawn and I were even saying when we were going out to the bars and all that, man, there are a lot more Texas fans here than I would have expected. So they really showed up, honestly, and it was a great crowd overall, but I was a little surprised by how many Texas fans actually made the trip all the way up to Ann Arbor.
Yeah, for sure. They show up and show out. We saw it last year with Alabama, and then this past Saturday at Michigan. You talk about crossing the Big House off of your bucket list. Michigan, the all-time winningest program in college football. The Big House, one of the most just historical, landmarks in sports. Period, not just in college football. Just describe the experience being in the stadium, for that 11 o'clock game and just everything that came with it.
It was awesome. It really was awesome. Now, I didn't unfortunately really get to be in the stadium too much because it's kind of you go in to get your press credential and then go right up to the press box. So I wasn't really in the crowd too much, but the crowd was outstanding. Obviously, it's one of the biggest stadiums in the world, so that was really cool to see as well. The crowd was just great. I mean, obviously Texas took them out of it pretty quickly, but before that, the crowd was outstanding, and you can see why it's one of the best home environments in college sports, honestly. So. It was awesome. I'm hopeful I can go to another game pretty soon. It was truly lived up to all the hype I heard coming into it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you and Dalton got to, make that trip. So, now getting actually into the game, what you saw on the field, most people picked Texas to win, right? We weren't the underdog or anything. Most people picked Texas to win. And a lot of people even felt comfortable about the spread. We saw it jump from 3.5 to 7.5 after, Texas beat up on Colorado State and Michigan kind of struggled with Fresno State, a 13-point game until about 2 minutes left in that contest before Will Johnson had the pick six. But did you expect Texas to essentially dominate from the opening snap the way that they did? Like, did you expect, like you said, them to just take the crowd out of it? 5-6 minutes into the game, if that.
It was nuts, man. That really was an impressive all-around performance. I knew the Texas defense had a clear advantage over Michigan offensively, just watching the tape back from the Fresno State game. And you could tell there were serious issues that Michigan offense just in that opening game. And then obviously against a better opponent in Texas, they really got exposed even more. So that I knew if Michigan was going to win this game, it had to be a low scoring, like 17-14 type game. But that Texas offense, I really was impressed because, Michigan's defense is one of the best in the country, and there's a big argument for that to be the best in the country with guys like Will Johnson and Mason Graham, who both could be top 5 picks in the draft. Kenneth Grant could be a top 20, 25 pick in the draft. Josiah Stewart, one of the best edges in the country. You got a good linebacker, Jayshon Barham as well. Like, they are loaded defensively, and yet Texas really just dominated. And really what I thought was most impressive was the Texas O-line really just dominated that Michigan D-line, which, like I said, can make an argument Michigan's the best D-line in the country on paper, and Texas, made them look like nothing close to that in that game. So Kelvin Banks Jr. lived up to the hype. That to me, when we talk about Kelvin Banks Jr. in February, March, and April for the draft, and we're talking about his best tape, I think that Michigan game is the one that people bring up. Like, hey, he dominated in that game against a really, really good D-line. So that was a great game for Kelvin Banks Jr. Ewers, once again, in a huge game, came up big. Obviously, the 2 Alabama games before come to mind, and this one he came up big as well. So really just an all-around amazing performance by Texas. And the defense dominating wasn't really that surprising to me, but the offense looking as good as it did, that to me was a little surprising.
Yeah, it never felt like they knocked Steve Sarkisian off his pivot. It felt like Steve Sarkisian came in there and did exactly what he wanted to do pretty much all game, from the outset. You talked about Kelvin Banks, Pro Football Focus, his highest graded offensive lineman on that Texas offensive line. He had a great performance. Like you said, when we're talking about the draft, they'll be showing those highlights, in that game, right? That's going to be some of that clip, some of the clips you see from the Michigan game. You talked about Quinn Ewers, right? And, obviously he had to come in and, play like the Quinn Ewers we saw against Alabama or against Oklahoma in 2022 to win this game. I know that, we've talked a bunch about Quinn Ewers and what all of you guys want to see from him this year is just the consistency, right? There's probably some other things, but the biggest thing is the consistency. Did he answer any questions you had about him long-term this past Saturday going against a defense like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously the thing with him, at least last year, was that you have the Alabama game and then you have the Wyoming game the very next week where he looks like nothing like that. You're like, dude, what is going on? So that to me is like, okay, let's see it like just consistently week in, week in. There's no denying he could do that to any team in the country. Like we've seen it now against elite defenses in Alabama and Michigan and other schools like that, hey, he could do this. Like he could, no matter what defense is across from him, he could torture him. And he's proven that now. Now it's just, okay, can you consistently do it? Can you show up every week and do it? But this game, I was so impressed. I think he just looked comfortable out there. There's a lot of times where, yes, Texas offensive line was dominant, but the few times they did allow pressure, he stepped up in the pocket and made a big throw. I mean, one of his best throws the entire day was one that got called back for a holding penalty on Cameron Williams. That wasn't really a holding penalty, you asked me, but that was, I think, one of his best throws of the day. That doesn't even go down in the stat sheet, really. So he was outstanding, I thought, especially when he was moved off the spot. Especially, I was really, really impressed with how he just stepped up in the pocket and just made throw after throw after throw. So he looks more comfortable every single game he plays, honestly. And like Banks, honestly, this could be a game that when we talk about him for the NFL draft, that a lot of GMs, there were a lot of NFL teams in attendance. I can tell you from firsthand experience being in that press box. I know there were 3 GMs, I believe, in that game. There were a lot of them that I'm sure came out of that game and said, Quinn Ewers is the guy. And I'm sure that when they are scouting quarterbacks for the draft, they're going to say, hey, I was in Ann Arbor for that game, and he was outstanding. So we'll see how he does the rest of the year and whether or not he can continue to do that every single week. But if he does that every week, yeah, he's going to be guaranteed a first-round pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I said a lot of, about Quinn Ewers. I thought he grew up, on Saturday, and
Yeah.
we've seen great performances before. But, there had been times where, he was under pressure and he would struggle, right? Or we would kind of see him revert to some bad habits. And I thought you talked about it, beautifully, the way he would step up, use his feet to, evade the rush, right? But like he just stayed poised, right? I know he had been in the big house before, but as CJ Stroud's backup, but like he played like he had been there. He played like, he was at DKR. I mean, he was just so poised, and that's the biggest reason that that game pretty much was out of hand early. So quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into some more about Texas. Really, I want to talk about that offensive line, that interior offensive line versus Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I thought Texas won that matchup, which was really surprising how they kind of just neutralized them. I want to talk to you about that once again after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot to stay alert to watch all your favorite games. Or if you stayed up late to see that intense overtime game, take a 5 Hour Energy shot in the morning so you can start your day. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and more. There is a flavor for everyone. Try them all on the site. You even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it is delivered right to your door. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, bringing Max back in. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but, I thought that if Michigan had one advantage coming into this game, right, it was going to be Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham against that interior offensive line. And I love my guys, right? I love, Devon Campbell, Jake Majors, and Hayden Conner, right? But I was like, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, right? They could push that pocket. They could get up in there and make things tough for Quinn Ewers and stop the run. Were you surprised that Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant didn't have a bigger impact in this game? I mean, if you had heard everything about these guys and you turned on that game, you would be like, those are the best defensive tackles in the country, probably. Like, not based on what you saw on Saturday. So like I said, were you surprised that they were so quiet in this game? Two of the best defensive prospects in the country.
Yeah, it was a little surprising. I thought, Hayden Conner only allowed one pressure. TJ Campbell allowed 0 pressures on 27 snaps. I will say Mason Graham ended up with 4 pressures in the game. So that's 4 pressures in the game is pretty solid. And Kenneth Grant only had 1 pressure, though, in the game. What I was really impressed by, though, was obviously they played great. I'm not taking that away from them. But I think the Texas offense really helped out the defense a lot in this game. And I think actually the defense really helped out the offense a lot in this game. That obviously with Michigan being on the field for so little, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, big guys, and how athletic they are. And I'm not taking away from that at all. But when you have 320 pounders that are playing all the time and all your offense can do is play 3 plays and then punt it, you're going to get gassed pretty quickly. And I was noticing that when I was watching Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. It's like, hey, they were coming to the sideline. And then Sark, I thought beautifully, was able to recognize when 55 and 78 were on the sidelines, they went no huddle. And then, because I watched, Mason Graham was like trying to get back in the game, but they were going no huddle. He had no opportunity to sub back into the game. So I thought there were a couple drives in that game where I really noticed that where Graham comes out for a breather for one play, but Sark immediately recognizes that. I'm sure he had an assistant coach helping him out, telling, hey, this guy's out of the game. Let's go. Because at that point, if you go no huddle, they can't sub him back in. So that was a really, really impressive part, I think, as well, is that obviously Campbell and Conner and everyone played great in the offensive line. Not taking away from that. I think they were the best part of the game, I think. But at the same time, the Texas defense did an excellent job of gassing out the other defense on the other side by making them be on the field for so long. And then also Sark and the play callers there at Texas and Quinn Ewers and everyone did a great job of recognizing when those guys were off the field, let's go, and not let them get back on the field. So, yes, they were neutralized when they were on the field, but I thought there was a collective team effort more than just the centers and the guards and everyone. I bet it was the Texas defense, Sark, everyone really helped neutralize what I think Michigan's 2 best defensive players are, besides Will Johnson, obviously. But those two, if you gas them out and you're able to get them off the field and make them tired, that you can see that Texas O-line dominate, and that's really what they did on Saturday.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I really love the way that you just illustrated that. When you talk about football, it can be really complex. There's so many moving parts, right? Offense, defense, special teams, so many different units. But somehow a lot of these, games come down to who has the best coach and who has the best quarterback. If you have a strong coach and a strong quarterback combination, you're going to win a lot of games, right? I talked about it on my last show in the NFL. It was Brady Belichick. Now it's, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, right? Typically, if you can win that matchup, quarterback and coach, you're going to win a lot of football games. And when I look at the landscape of college football right now, especially after Texas just beat Michigan, Georgia aside, right? I'm not going to get too crazy on here. I'm saying? Georgia aside, do you see any team in college football that definitively has a better coach and quarterback combo than Steve Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers right now?
Oh, no, I can't. I can't say it. The only one I'm kind of debating, but even that is looked rough to start the year, is DeBoer and Milroe. Because I love Kalen DeBoer. I think he's a brilliant coach, and Milroe I liked a lot last year too. But Milroe just came off a rough game against USF this past weekend. So that we're gonna kind of wait. And I think he's a superstar. Don't get me wrong, but I'm still kind of waiting to see. But as of right now, yeah, I would say behind Beck and Kirby, yeah, it's probably Ewers and Sarkisian right now. So yeah, it's probably the best coach quarterback combo we have in the country.
Yeah, I know you're really high on Ole Miss. I mean, is there a chance Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin or nah?
It's close. Yeah, I think Dart is in that grouping with Ewers right now. They also have not played anyone this year yet. But Lane Kiffin, I think I saw a stat that's absolutely wild. But Jackson Dart has 8 total touchdowns this season, and he has 7 incompletions this season, which is just like ludicrous numbers for that guy. Obviously, they played Furman and Middle Tennessee, so they haven't really done too much yet, but that's still ludicrous numbers for him. So there's a chance that Lane Kiffin and Dart, I think they're very similar to what Ewers and Sark have, but I would give that slight edge to Ewers and Sark just based off the Michigan game this season at least. But yeah, they could certainly join that group as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then, now just kind of, Texas fans always got to get a little bit crazy, right? So addressing the somewhat elephant in the room. And I know you had, last time we talked, you had Ole Miss in terms of by the end of the season probably being a little bit better than Texas. We'll see how that ends up. Or at least being a bigger threat to Georgia, I guess. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But based on what you've seen through 2 weeks of the season, is it still Georgia and everybody else? Or do you think Texas has closed that gap? Texas moved up to number 2 in the AP poll. They play on October 19th. Like I said, right now, in your opinion, is it Georgia and everybody else? Or would you put Texas in that tier, or are they knocking on the door?
They're knocking on the door. I still think Georgia. I think Texas deserves to be number 2. I think they deserve to be the number 2 team in the country, and they are. But I think there's still a pretty clear. Okay, Georgia's got to mess up, and maybe it doesn't have to lose. Just mess up enough where like, oh, they look vulnerable, because right now they don't look vulnerable right now. And that Clemson game, I mean, they just destroyed them. And I know Texas destroyed Michigan as well, but I just think Georgia, coming into the year, when I thought about Georgia as well, I'm still going to put them in their own tier, but I think Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, they're in that next tier as well. Even Missouri, if you want to throw them in there too. Yeah, I think there's still a gap between Georgia and everyone else, but Texas, that was a really impressive performance. And I think, again, that's the kind of performance that makes you think, hey, Texas is a real national title contender this year.
Yeah, all right. You can leave the craziness to the Texas fans. We'll be the ones that say Georgia looks vulnerable. We can get to about October 19th. Max isn't ready to go there yet. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we get to discuss the SEC Locked On SEC. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns also brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Hey, Locked On Longhorn fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing game of simulation, you get to step in the shoes of a head coach or Steve Sarkisian and lead your college football program to glory. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Longhorns fans. Use the promo code Locked On CFB all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, bringing Max Chadwick back in from Pro Football Focus. And like I said, Chris Gordy dropped his Week 3 Locked On SEC Power Rankings. We saw a lot of movement this week in the Power Rankings, some good, some bad from the schools in the SEC. So I'm going to go ahead and drop them up on the screen. And before Max goes, I just want to explain some quick changes. So after the performances from this weekend, Ole Miss jumped up to the number 3 spot. Alabama drops down to number 4 after struggling with USF. Tennessee jumps Missouri after a big win against NC State. LSU jumps up from 9 to 7, while Oklahoma drops from 7 to 9 after barely squeaking by Houston. Auburn drops all the way from 8 to 13 after losing to Cal. South Carolina moves up from 16 to 8 after dominating Kentucky. And then Kentucky, after being dominated, moves from number 10 to number 16. So, Max, when you look at these rankings, the Locked On SEC rankings going into Week 3, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first 6 I completely agree with. I think that's exactly how I'd order the top 6, and I would say those 6 are 6 of the top 10 teams in the country right now. So I completely agree with that. After that, I think at 7, I think it's a really good argument for Oklahoma. I think, yeah, they squeaked by Houston, which is not a good team at all, don't get me wrong, but LSU, obviously, they already lost the game to USC. And then also, people got to remember, that Nichols final score might have looked like a blowout for LSU. That was a close game a lot later in the game than you would expect. I think it was like a 2-point game at some point in the fourth quarter. So they did not look good against Nichols either. So I put Oklahoma at number 7 right now. I would also put LSU at number 8 after that. And I think there's an argument for South Carolina after that as well. But I'm more in the wait-and-see mode with the Gamecocks right now, even though they looked really, really good against Kentucky. So, yeah, I think that's probably how I would order. I think it's a pretty good list overall, but I just personally would have Oklahoma a couple spots higher and then put LSU at 8 and South Carolina at 9, and then maybe not Vanderbilt at 10. I know they beat Virginia Tech, but I get you're kind of reacting to all that. But, yeah, I think, again, it's solid overall. Just a few changes I would make from 7 on.
Yeah, so just a few questions for you. You know, Oklahoma, had to get a safety at the end to make that a touchdown game. I mean, there was a chance for Houston to come down and kick a game-winning field goal. You said you would have them at 7, so you're not as, concerned about Oklahoma and their offense as even some Oklahoma fans, because they were screaming for their backup, getting Jackson Arnold out of there in his 3rd start. But it doesn't sound like you're too concerned about the Sooners.
I am concerned. I think they have issues offensively. I think Jackson Arnold, I don't think it's his fault. I think the thing with him is that he is excellent from a clean pocket, but the issue is under pressure, he's not as good. And the big issue is the Oklahoma offensive line has not been looking very good at all. It's a brand new offensive line, essentially, and it's kind of struggled out the gate so far. So I do have issues with them. I don't think they're a playoff team ultimately, but they are 2-0. And like I said, LSU hasn't necessarily looked dominant either, right? They lost to USC, and they really struggled with Nichols for a lot of that game before putting him away. So you can make an argument that South Carolina should be at number 7 after their dominant win over Kentucky, but I'm more in a wait-and-see mode with them. But like I said, there's a pretty big gap from the top 6 to the rest of it right now. But I personally would have Oklahoma still at number 7 until proven otherwise.
What are your thoughts on Auburn losing to Cal? How disappointing was that for you?
Yeah, it was crazy because if you told me they held Jaden Ott, who's Cal's best player by a mile, to 10 carries for 11 yards, I would have said, wow, Auburn destroyed them this game. And they lost, obviously. So Peyton Thorne looked really rough out there, obviously throwing 4 interceptions. He had like a 50 passing grade as well. On the other side, Fernando Mendoza, the Cal quarterback, had a really good game, had like a 90 passing grade. So it really wasn't the difference between the quarterbacks that was the deciding factor in that game. And Auburn has a pretty big issue at quarterback right now. Peyton Thorne last year had issues throwing the ball. He's proven he has issues this year throwing the ball. They have talented weapons around him, but Auburn's got to figure out the quarterback situation, and I just don't know if they have an answer outside of Peyton Thorne right now.
Florida, DJ Lagway, talk about a hell of a debut, right? He looked amazing, although, not against great competition. How do you think that shapes out moving forward? I know Graham Mertz is, hurt with a concussion. I guess we'll see if he's, even healthy enough to come back. But what direction do you think they should go at quarterback with, Billy Napier kind of being a dead man walking at this point?
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting on-field discussion about it, and there's a really interesting off-field discussion about it. And I think Napier actually came out today and said they're going to run a two-quarterback system and just see who the hot hand is, I guess. But I think the on-field discussion is, okay, Graham Mertz is probably more is definitely the more conservative of the two. He's going to play a lot safer with the football. He's going to give you what's there. He's not going to go above and beyond his job, but he'll be safe. Lagway unlocks a whole new element to that offense. Even you can even see that Sanford game. That kid has serious arm talent that, frankly, Graham Mertz doesn't even have close to having the same kind of arm that 18-year-old kid has already. So Lagway gives you a different dimension, and I think he is the more potential of the two. It just depends on where you want to go. Do you want to play safe, or do you want to go with the potential? I think you got to go with potential. I think if you're Billy Napier right now, you're on the hottest of hot seats in America right now. You need to prove, hey, one of his arguments for keeping his job could be, hey, let me develop this kid, because if you fire me, he might transfer. And this is maybe the most talented quarterback he's brought in years. And I think that's a really interesting argument as well, is that, hey, Graham Mertz starting the whole year, maybe that doesn't save Billy Napier's job, but if he starts TJ Lagway, he at least can have the argument of saying, hey, let me develop him for one more year, then decide on my future. That, I think, is the ultimate off-field reason why I think Lagway might get to start the rest of the year, just because Billy Napier, frankly, is in survival mode right now, and I think Lagway gives him the slimmest of chances, but I still think he gives him a chance of surviving this season.
Yeah, and then Kentucky, you saw them last in the power rankings this week after absolutely getting dominated, by South Carolina 31-6. Like you said, we had questions about South Carolina, after they barely squeaked by, Old Dominion. Texas will face Kentucky later in the year. What are your thoughts on them just absolutely getting, outclassed in that game?
Yeah, it was surprising. I mean, they were like 9-point favorites in that game over South Carolina, and they lost by 25. I think they lost ultimately, but the offense has serious issues. Brock Vandagriff has not lived up to the 5-star hype he had coming out of high school 4 years ago now. They have talent offensively. They have good receivers, but the O-line has issues. Vandagriff has not looked good so far. They have a good defense. I really do believe that. They do have a lot of good defensive players, but again, it's like the Michigan thing where it's like if your offense doesn't do anything, it puts your defense in a hard spot being on the field for that long. So I think Vandagriff right now is a big question mark for them, and whether or not he can be the quarterback could determine whether or not Kentucky is a good team or not. Because I think if Vandagriff is good, they could be a top 25 team in the country. But if he's not good and your offense looks like that, then, yeah, they could be one of the worst teams in the SEC. So it's a big issue with them right now, and they're hoping that Vandagriff this week can look a lot better against his old team in Georgia.
Yeah, for sure. I doubt it. Right. So, Max, appreciate you. Great analysis today for sure. Co-host of the Pro Football's Focuses College Football Show. I know you said it before on the podcast, but let them know where they can find you outside of Locked On Longhorns to get more of your great content.
Yeah, so you could find it all at the PFF College Football Show on YouTube and anywhere your podcast as well. We go live every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. breaking down the biggest games in college football, and then we also go live every Tuesday night, so tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern time to go over the 5 or 6 or so biggest games in college football the very next week to preview them. So, it's very fun times right now, and we're having a lot of fun covering the PFF College Football Show.
Yeah, for sure. Elite stuff from Max Chadwick, as always, Pro Football Focus. And for Locked On Longhorn fans, I guess we could put the Michigan game to rest. I guess we could start talking about UTSA. Right? And peace.